Hi, everyone. Good morning, good evening, depending from where you are connected. Welcome and thanks for joining GHAI for the launch of our annual report on industry interference titled Marketing Exposed, a Global Public Health Threat for Food Policy. I am Luján Abramo. I am just replacing Lore for this little bit because she is having technical issues with the computer, who will be our moderator today, and we are incredibly happy to be presenting our third annual report on industry interference in healthy food policies. So just some background information. As part of the advocacy work we do around the world, supporting local civil society organizations, industry opposition is the main obstacle we face against policy change. So marketing practices of unhealthy products are not only promoting unhealthy environments, but also allowing profit-oriented entities, such as the ultra-processed product industry, to decide the policies that will regulate them, putting the population at risk. So today we have an amazing panel of speakers from GHAI, along with advocates from Mexico, South Africa, and the US, who will discuss which ones are the policy solutions or approaches to the problem that our report is highlighting. So the impressive bios of all the panelists will be shared through the chat, so we can jump directly into our conversations. For the Q&As, we'll have a space to discuss questions and answers and comments from the audience. So please submit your questions through the Q&A function that you will see at the bottom of your screen. And then we will address them at the end of the webinar. And now I will give the floor to Veronica Schoch for some opening remarks, who is the Vice President of GHAI's Food and Nutrition portfolio. So, Vero, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Luji. Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. I am Veronica Schoch. I have the pleasure and honor to be the lead of the Food and Nutrition portfolio in the Global Health Advocacy Incubator. Our mission is to build a global movement which advocates for equitable and sustainable food system, ensuring all people the right to access healthy food, supported by evidence-based policies free of conflict of interest. And the focus of our work until now has been mostly policies to reduce the access of ultra-processed food and beverages and healthy products through marketing restrictions, front-of-package labeling, sugar beverage taxation, school environments regulations, among others. And our approach as Global Health Advocacy Incubator is the same, whatever is the policy, is supporting civil society organizations at local level in different geographies around the globe to develop locally led advocacy campaigns. And as Luji mentioned, the advocacy, comprehensive advocacy campaigns include several components to be effective. One of them is decision makers advocacy, providing technical assistance, legal support. Another key component is media advocacy, to put the issue in the media, in the public agenda. Another key component is the coalition building, to really build a movement of civil society, academic organizations supporting the policy change. And last but not least, a key component of our advocacy approach is opposing and exposing industry interference. This is very significant component because, as Luján mentioned, this is the most important challenge to move forward with food policy around the globe. And in that regard, in 2019, the Global Health Advocacy Incubator launched a pilot that in 2020 became a global initiative to expose and counter industry interference in food policy. And this is the third year that we publish an annual global report on industry interference. I invite you to visit our website, our ultra-processed product industry watch, where you can find the 3 reports and many other materials that are useful to support locally led campaigns. And the first year we chose, for instance, the focus of our global report was show how the food and beverage ultra-processed industry used the COVID pandemic to develop multi-washing and position themselves in the middle of one of the biggest health crises in the world. In 2021, we focused in the playbook of the industry to oppose front of package labeling, and this year we chose marketing. And why marketing? Why the report this year is focusing marketing? As you know, the marketing of ultra-processed products is massive. It's simply everywhere. It's aggressive, it's deceptive, and it's especially targeting vulnerable populations, particularly children and adolescents. In other words, marketing of an ultra-processed product is a way of commercial children exploitation. But marketing is much more than that. As you can see in our report, and it's going to be presented now, the marketing is much more than the advertising or promotions we can see in television or in social networks. It's also a way the ultra-processed industries use as a platform to penetrate the decision-making spaces through corporate social responsibility, through public-private partnerships, through corporate capture at all levels, through multi-washing strategies. They use the marketing as a way to undermine and oppose food policy change. So that's why we think regulation to comprehensively restrict marketing of ultra-processed products is an urgent need to protect public health and particularly to protect vulnerable populations as children and adolescents. Last, before giving the floor to you, Lucy, I wanted to say a huge thank you to the team for this effort to develop this third annual global report. It was a team effort. Also, I wanted to say thank you to the local partners that provided a lot of valuable information to build this collective and global report. I also wanted to say thank you to the amazing panelists that are joining today and accepted the invitation to enrich this conversation. And last, I want to say thank you to Bloomberg Philanthropies for the support that provided all these years that make all this work possible. Thank you so much. And Lucy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Vero. So I will briefly present the findings of our report. And as Vero mentioned, we invite you all to visit the microsite where you can find the full report in English, and you will soon find it in Spanish and Portuguese as well. So as Vero was mentioning, this report is done as part of the Industry Watch initiative in GHAI, as industry opposition is the main obstacle that civil society organizations we support face against policy change. We believe that understanding harmful corporate behaviors, exposing its negative implications on planetary and human health, and holding the industry accountable are key. So this report is part of that effort. As Vero mentioned, we released 2 reports already. In 2020 was the COVID one, and last year we focused our report on the corporate strategies that were delaying and weakening front of package labeling regulations. And this year is focused on marketing practices of ultra-processed food and beverage products. So the focus of the report is to see and to expose how the marketing of these unhealthy products are affecting human and planetary health, and also how they are serving as a corporate washing strategy that are allowing the industry to have a privileged seat in policymaking tables. Next slide, please. So just to tell you a little bit how the report is done, we collect throughout the year public information that is available in social media, in media outlets. We also review the sustainability and operational reports from companies, from trade associations, from front groups. So all the examples that local partners provide to us from the data collection that they do on the ground. And we came up with more than 300 examples relevant to the focus of our report from different 52 countries. We qualitatively analyzed this information, and our key findings were 4 main reasons why the ultra-processed product marketing threatens public health and needs to be mandatorily regulated. And I'm not going to dive into this next point, but all these key findings are related to the industry playbook that we identified on our last year report. And you can see this connection that we did on the page 10 of the current report in English. Next one, please. So regarding the key findings, these 4 specific reasons that we think justify urgent state action against marketing are the following 4. So the first one is how marketing practices are generating a domino effect of negative implications, not only by creating unhealthy food environments, but because they are a highly influential determinant to corporate practices. So the industry is trying to position alternative policy solutions such as self-regulation. So they are self-regulating what they have to do without proper accountability and transparency. They are also putting the burden of NCDs on individuals. And while they do this, they also affect the environment and the entire food systems from seed to fork. And what happens with this is that all the profits they are doing belong to them and all the losses are socialized. So this is the first point that we want to make. The next one is how, as Vero was mentioning, and we believe this is a crucial point in our work, is how we need to think about marketing broadly and not only all these practices of advertising, promotion, and sponsorship, but also to include these practices that allow the industry to wash their image. We call it corporate washing, to kind of highlight how what the industry says they do is very different from what they truly do. And these actions serve to polish their image, to distract the public, to distract the governments, and also to generate a kind of shield against criticism. Something very kind of transparent to see this is greenwashing. So all the pledges, all the environmental promises that the industry does, and in reality, we are seeing an enormous climate crisis all over the world. The third reason that we found is how all marketing practices of ultra-processed products are aggressive, insidious, and are everywhere. And it's allowing the industry to penetrate and to weaken traditional foods from different cultures, because ultra-processed products are accessible, they are sold as convenient, they are sold as indulgent products. And this is affecting food traditions, food culture, and also food sovereignty, because at the same time, its production chain, it's associated with land grabbing issues, with unsustainable agricultural practices such as monoculture, use of pesticides, what is generating biodiversity loss, affecting farmers and rural communities, and many other effects. And the last but not least, like the last reason, it's about how we are seeing the ultra-processed product industry target children and adolescents. So what they are doing is that they are ultra-targeting marketing practices to them, so they ensure profits over time. This is something we also saw from the tobacco industry. They are using their data, they are using children's imagery because they are using them in their marketing campaigns as influencers in social media, and they are building brand loyalty at a very young age. So this is just like a quick scope of the findings, and now I want to share with you some of the examples that are highlighted in the report. So next slide, please. Great. So this first reason, as I mentioned, is related to how the industry is putting the burden of NCDs on individuals, how they are trying to position physical activity, educational initiatives as alternative to mandatory policies. And we know that that is not the approach that works for public policy. And the examples that are highlighted here are 3. There is one from the National Association of Food and Beverage from Ecuador, in which they are promoting physical activity and educational activities to kind of address non-communicable diseases. We also saw that last year, the International Food and Beverage Association updated the self-regulatory commitment they have on responsible marketing, and this generated this year, 2022, a cascade of new and updated commitments on responsible marketing from companies such as Unilever, PepsiCo, Nestlé, and Kellogg's. And as part of this first reason, we are seeing that the industry is claiming to have a place in food governance. We know that the environmental impact of food systems are very related and intertwined. And we found out that Coca-Cola and Unilever were some of the companies that were calling for a global agreement, an international mandatory agreement to cut plastic pollution, at the same time that they were 2 of the main plastic polluters of the world. And we know that this last Monday, they started the negotiation on this treaty. And we know that Coca-Cola and other companies are having presence in Uruguay while this treaty is being negotiated. Next slide, please. Great. So this one is the one related to corporate washing, this reason. And I want to mention that this example is not included in the report, but we thought it was timely to highlight it here. Because Coca-Cola was sponsoring the COP27 on climate change. So at the same time that Coca-Cola is the most plastic polluter company of the world, the company was sponsoring the COP. And we also got some images from social media that Nestle was also there providing water, and that Coca-Cola were providing, of course, that free products across the conference that happened earlier this month in Egypt. Next one, please. Yeah, so this reason is the one that it's related to how aggressive, insidious, and how ultra-processed products marketing is everywhere, and how these practices are allowing the industry to penetrate and to disturb traditional food cultures. So they do this through something similar to this example that we are seeing from Maggi in Colombia, associating ultra-processed product with traditional food, with home-cooked food. And this example from Colombia is a huge campaign. Maggi is a brand from Nestle, and they were talking about how they were through their ultra-processed products rescuing the cultural diversity of the different Colombian regions. And the other example in the right is one that is not from this year, but is about how Nestle introduced a floating supermarket in the Brazilian Amazon, and how they are seeing health effects in children and in entire populations. Next one, please. And the last one is about how they are ultra targeting marketing to children. And we have seen three different trends under these, three different tactics under this reason. One is how they are targeting digital marketing of unhealthy products to children. I just put this report from the Center for Digital Democracy, and we have one of the authors today with us who will share some of the reflections from that report. We are also seeing the industry use children's images to position their products. This is a case from an influencer mom in South Africa. And we're also seeing the ultra-processed product industry where the children should be especially protected, such as schools or educational facilities. And this is like an enormous campaign that we saw grow all around the world from Kinder, which is a Ferrero brand, where they are promoting physical activity while also branding kids with their brands. So just some quick examples to share with you. And the last slide, please. And yeah, I'm not going to dive into this because we will discuss a little bit the solutions that are in the report with the reflections from the panelists. But we also want to share with you that the report has a specific call to actions for governments and for civil society organizations. Just to mention a few, for governments, we know that we need mandatory and comprehensive corporate marketing restrictions that are broad enough, that include online and offline marketing and different channels. We also need the governments to adopt mandatory frameworks to prevent the influence of private actors in policymaking. And we also need civil society organizations to be part of this work. We need to connect with different movements that are working in corporate accountability and also in public health policy. So just to mention a few, the last slide now is just to invite you to visit our microsite, where all the reports will be uploaded, and it contains a summary of the report. It's shorter than the report itself. So with that, I leave it there. Thanks to all the team that was part of this effort, and I'll give the floor to Lore now. Thank you.
Thank you, Luján, and good morning, everyone. I'm Lorena Ibarra. I work as a senior advocacy advisor for the Global Health Advocacy Incubator, and I will be your moderator for today. So based on the 4 reasons that Luján just shared with us, our report, as you could see, highlights the different problems that are associated to the marketing practice of the ultra-processed products and beverage industries. And now we would like to focus and share and explore with you with our panelists what could be some potential solutions to address these problems. So we want to reflect on what can be done by civil society organizations, how we can also strengthen some governments to put in place some mandatory measures to start they're normalizing the marketing practices that are everywhere, as Lujan was mentioning. So with this, we have invited researchers and activists to discuss this problem. And now we want to invite Petronelle Kruger from Priceless in South Africa to share with us some of the reflections that their group and their work have been advancing in. So Petronelle, welcome and thank you for joining us today. Based on your experience and the work of Priceless, what are some of the regulatory opportunities that you have identified, or maybe policy solutions that you have identified to regulate unhealthy food marketing? Consider that most of the UPP industries that do not, that argue that those practices are legal and that they should not be regulated because of they are so normalized.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for having me, and congratulations on an excellent report. I've had the privilege of reading the copy, and I'm very excited to see the report taking a very expansive approach and including hidden marketing practices such as corporate social responsibility. So just by way of introduction, my name is Petronelle Kruger. I'm a public health lawyer at the University of Witwatersrand at an organization called Priceless. And we've done a few qualitative studies and we've engaged with local policymakers. So the first part of your question, Lorena, that I want to address, and I think that it's very important for us to understand, is that even though companies would argue, and to an extent they're correct, they do have very permissive landscapes in which they can engage in marketing practices, and from a legal perspective we would call that commercial speech. The law is ever changing, and the law is a tool that is supposed to reflect social values. So we have seen marketing in various industries being regulated successfully for various reasons. So to protect children from, for example, inappropriate adult content, to protect consumers in industries where there might be, a consumer literacy issue, such as pharmaceutical advertisements. And I think very important for our discussion today, some of the successes we've had in terms of restricting marketing of alcohol and tobacco products, where we've seen from the 70s fairly invasive, restrictive, comprehensive regulations in these industries actually passing international and local scrutiny, even by courts. And I was invited to talk about the South African experience. We've had this issue with tobacco companies challenging marketing restrictions of tobacco products in South Africa. And the two very important things that the court said is, as long as you can prove that the actual restriction or policy that you're implementing is evidence-based and is addressing some type of other interest, so in this case, promoting the health of the general public, and you can show that it is the necessary step, that policy should be successful. And we can see reports such as this is just contributing to the growing body of evidence, which is just telling us overwhelmingly that we need to rejigger the marketing landscape, especially when it comes to vulnerable populations such as children, where they don't necessarily have the ability to distinguish between true and commercial messaging. Now, from a South African perspective, but I'm sure true for everyone, and I think we can all reflect on this together, because marketing is so, and I really like that term, aggressive, insidious, and everywhere, it can't be regulated from one specific point, although you probably will have a sector which should start the process of overhauling marketing in your country in terms of ultra-processed products. So, for example, we have linear types of media such as radio and television, outdoor billboards, marketing in public transport, and we also have, newer forms of media posing new issues, such as your non-linear, on-demand audio and audio-visual content services. So things like your Netflix and your Disney Plus and YouTube, and the algorithm on social media, which I'm telling you now knows me better than I know myself. So with this perspective, our understanding has been that we need to find areas of intervention in all of these spaces. So we would need to have a set of policy recommendations and engage with a set of policymakers. Our own entry point in South Africa is that our Department of Communications has indicated that our current communications framework isn't meeting the demands of sort of this new media fourth wave of media that we're seeing. So within this framework, we've advocated quite successfully, and we hope to see more happening in this, that the framework should also include more advanced restrictions on various things that are harmful. And our opportunity that we saw was specifically through the restriction of child-directed marketing. And you see there is a lot of momentum for us to restrict child-directed marketing because international protections for children are stronger, and it's an easier case to make for governments to show why children specifically should be protected. But we also need to engage with stakeholders such as our education department to make sure that sponsorship of school events, for example, are not sponsored by ultra-processed product manufacturers. And we need to engage with local municipalities to ensure that we have outdoor advertising which is appropriate. So, for example, not close to areas where children frequent, to have certain harmful advertising. And the way in which we think that can be done is by creating an overall code that can guide all of these policymakers, setting out very clearly what type of marketing practice is prohibited, what type of products or brands should fall within the ambit of these regulations, and what is the procedural process for actually holding these players to account. So what are the sanctions? We have an independent body, and it will need a few tweaks to actually function as independently as possible, but the Advertising Regulatory Board, which, for example, can host this code of conduct, but will then rely on other players to make sure that within their respective fields that they regulate, that it's actually enforced. Thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to hearing some of the questions and sharing more reflections as we talk more on this discussion. Thanks.
Thank you, Petronelle, for your intervention and for your clear ideas. And I would like to highlight just part of the all ideas that you shared with us, how the current framework is not enough to protect and reflect social values. That's so important in terms of how marketing has been a practice so normalized that now we see all of this that Lujan was mentioning as something that is part of our lives, and it shouldn't be that way. You also mentioned the need for strong regulations that actually protect vulnerable populations, especially children, as they have a special framework of protection. So that's also something that you bring to the table so that we can explore some possibilities on that realm. You also bring something that is very important in terms of health promotion, which is collaborative work among decision makers, but among decision makers cross-cutting in terms of all of the areas of policy making should be involved in this process, not only health or only education. This is a complex process that needs to have more involvement from different decision makers. And the last point that you also mentioned is how we create those opportunities to hold the industry accountable for all these practices. So thank you very much, Petronelle, for this intervention. And I would like to remind all of our participants to use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screens to share any comments or questions that you have to our panelists. And now we want to invite you all, before jumping into our next speaker, we would like to ask our participants the following questions through an interactive poll that will appear in your screen. So please feel free and answer this question. So Which challenges do you see more prominent in your country regarding unhealthy food and beverages digital marketing? And you have there 6 options for your response: unregulated space, lack of knowledge on internet governance, lack of international best practices, cross-border marketing, and enforcement of strong policies, too many actors involved in the online ecosystem. So please pick your response and we will see how the results come out. Okay, so we have here our responses. Thank you all for participating. 53% of our participants feel and have faced or identified these digital spaces. The most challenging part that this is an unregulated space. And for this reason, we have invited Jeff Chester from the Center for Digital Democracy in the US. Jeff, thank you for joining us today, and thank you for being willing to share with us your experience. Last year, the Center for Digital Democracy released a report highlighting the relationships between big food and big tech regarding the digital marketing on unhealthy products, especially targeted to children. Based on this resource, your experience and your work, could you please share with us how civil society organizations around the world could advocate for a stronger digital marketing regulations, which standards you consider that should be followed or should be included, and how ethics do play a role in this discussion?
Thank you, and congratulations on this important new Industry Watch report. Big data, predictive analysis, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, social media surveillance, cross-device and geolocation tracking and apps. These are just part of the food and beverage marketers' arsenal of digital tools used to target us today worldwide. These techniques are all interconnected with other techniques in the system that is deployed globally at nation states and regions, and is commonly transmitted throughout the world. Marketing today is about brands and digital media companies helping structure our personal and collective identities, our emotions and behaviors. And we're at a very unique moment here where these industry forces are in transition, in part because of the growing call for regulation of the data practices. So we have an opportunity, but without regulation and accountability, these online marketing forces will become, in my opinion, more effective. Every company today, food manufacturers, quick service restaurants, obviously Google, Meta, and what we call platforms, e-commerce companies, all the advertisers and ad agencies have all been transformed into big data advertising companies. The structure of the industry has fundamentally changed. It's not just in this industry, and you all know all this. It's the pharmaceutical industry, it's the financial services industry. They have all incorporated the techniques pioneered by Google and Facebook, especially to take advantage of all of the information that is available today about us. And because they know that they can connect to us, they can track us, they can surveil us, they can reach and influence us at any moment of the day, which is why they are now engaged in what's called omni-channel targeting and tracking when we're on gaming, using our mobile devices, on our personal computers, etc. The techniques that they use and the structure of the industry, I believe, is both a threat, but also a political and advocacy opportunity. All the practices that they are engaged in, and you've covered a number of them in this report just now, I think make them highly vulnerable. They collect all our information, even from children. They're tracking and surveilling us wherever we go, including our location. They use the most advanced tools to what's called neuromarketing to really kind of influence our unconscious and subconscious and emotional minds in ways that's never been practiced before. They engage in what's increasingly called by data regulators dark patterns, structure the online environment so that it is not clear, it's manipulative in order for us to give up more information. And they're using content which they themselves consider to be immersive and work at unconscious levels through virtual reality. And clearly the so-called emerging metaverse is part of that. Everything they are doing, in my opinion, makes them highly vulnerable to regulation, to public shaming, and for pressure campaigns. Now, I'd like to just quickly go through, and you probably all know this, some of the techniques that they're using, because I think that's what creates the potential agenda for a collective intervention here. As I said, they're all big data companies. So if you look at what Coca-Cola, Pepsi, McDonald's, Mondelez have done over the years, they have heavily invested in state-of-the-art, what's called advertising technology, ad tech tools. They collect every bit of our data. They have practices that whenever we're online and interact with their product, whether we're using their app, whether we're using digital coupons, what we watch on video and streaming audio, they collect all that data. They now analyze it using big data tools to understand how more effectively to reach and influence us. So we have to look under the hood of these companies' data practices, which are a rich source for investigation, litigation, regulatory action, and I believe public shaming here. And I think all this information is really available. If you read the report, you will see, that a lot of this information is really there. If you look at the annual reports, if you look at the suppliers, the technology suppliers, et cetera. So, for example, Pepsi, and this is in the report, but this is new. This was in the newsletters this week. I mean, Pepsi has a data science division, and it developed what it calls PepViz, PEPVIZ. Which it describes as, quote, bringing together real-time data and analytics with actionable insights and data-driven solutions, technology that gives it a direct line of sight into holistic behavior of retail customers across channels, identifies customer trends, unquote, and more. I always say, I couldn't make this stuff up. If you look at, so Pepsi has two data sets there, what it calls the store DNA to help retailers, and the consumer DNA, which is exposing our vulnerabilities. All the companies, including Mondelez, for example, which has pioneered with Google for years. And if you go online and look up Mondelez and Google Cloud, you'll see a great case study, another example of how they all use big data. All the companies feel that they have the right to engage in this far-ranging surveillance and manipulation of young people, of vulnerable communities, of all consumers, without being responsible for privacy, data protection, public health concerns. So I think the big data use here provides a great opportunity for an intervention. The role of artificial intelligence and machine learning, which is related. Since 2018, when Google announced it was, quote, putting machine learning in the hands of every advertiser, unquote, every other company has adopted also these state-of-the-art tools that engage in predictive analytics. They know they get all this data and they run these projections. They understand how to influence us, what content will trigger our reaction, not just us, but our community. And this process is constantly updated. This system of artificial intelligence, machine learning is unaccountable. It is non-transparent. It is manipulative, and I believe it provides an opportunity for action. So McDonald's, for example, invested and is partnering with a New Zealand company called Plexure. And this is in the report. And this is another example where I couldn't make this stuff up, although we all know that they do this. One of the features of Plexure's technology, which is McDonald's is its biggest client, is, quote, the ability to generate personalized marketing content meaningful to the individual and more likely to trigger a dopamine release and bring pressure. That's where Plexure comes in, helping brands pinpoint consumer desire, unquote. So they know, McDonald's knows worldwide that their technology through the app is in fact designed to trigger, right, these kind of neurotransmitters to make people more open to the advertising and marketing. If you look at neuromarketing, which is another place that's related to AI and machine learning in a way, but where the industry has made a huge investment and where there's really been significant advances worldwide in how they're able to understand our unconscious mind, they are testing at a mass scale the messages to individuals using the latest tools to trigger implicit persuasion, to deliver the marketing message and the branding directly to our subconscious and emotional state. Food and beverage companies and Meta, TikTok, Google have all used some form of neuromarketing. Just 2 months ago, candy company Mars won one of the most prestigious advertising awards for developing a tool that uses, quote, artificial intelligence and machine learning technology to understand how consumers behave and how they think both consciously and unconsciously, unquote. It analyzes, quote, second by second attention and emotion data, unquote, to fine tune an ad campaign that is better linked to sales. Once again, there are so many examples here where they are engaged in directly manipulating the unconscious, subconscious emotional minds, including of young people. So what can we do? I've always thought here that the Achilles heel of the marketing industry is privacy. And I've lost track. I have to see how much time I have. And my organization helped pass, which is the United States' only data protection law, which sadly only covers children 12 and under. We did this in 1998. But if you can cut off the data, you have an opportunity to change the nature of the industry. And many countries have some form of privacy data protection laws. Often they have an agency. There's an opportunity here to package a data protection complaint designed to stop the use of data to target these unhealthy products and practices. And there are plenty of privacy advocates who can help, I believe, the food and beverage companies, food and beverage advocates, craft these campaigns. And indeed, in my own country, in the United States right now, which is actually considering regulating what's called surveillance advertising, food and beverage regulatory advocates have asked our Federal Trade Commission to regulate the data practices that target young people and have used food and beverage marketing as an example. Advertising laws, all the ways that we know that contemporary advertising works, not beyond the data collection, but the use of artificial intelligence and virtual reality and neuromarketing provide new opportunities to go to regulators, to go to advertising authorities if you have it, and demand investigations and change. These are all unfair practices, which I think can be documented. In addition to privacy and kind of updating the advertising and regulatory laws, and by the way, all of these data collection techniques are also occurring on streaming video. So to the extent that people have streaming video in the home, not just YouTube, but devices that bring streaming in. The streaming video industry is now part of this surveillance advertising industry. The data is being collected. And if you have a video, media regulator, there are opportunities there. And finally, antitrust. More and more of these companies are merging or partnering. So for example, Microsoft's takeover of Activision, we have raised objections in part because of its targeting of kids. Activision is a big marketer of junk food to young people. And as these mergers occur, if there's an opportunity to intervene, you might be able, you put some more pressure on, and you might even be able to get something. In this case, it looks like our Federal Trade Commission might come out against the Microsoft Activision merger. These are just some of the techniques that I think we should be considering working together, collectively to help develop and send a strong message to the industry that we know what they're doing and they can't get away with it. Thanks.
Jeff, thank you so much for your generosity sharing with us all this knowledge and experience. And it's really amazing. While listening to you, I was thinking of a commercial vicious cycle in which consumers are involved, that we are not really aware that we are involved in that vicious cycle of neuromarketing. And also, when we talk about marketing, digital marketing practices, we are not only talking about marketing itself through those subconscious practices that you are mentioning, but we are also, and you brought this up as a matter of transparency and as a matter also of accountability, which is what's behind digital marketing, what's behind those practices that are actually getting into our privacy and some elements of manipulation that are really telling us, or maybe it's not telling us, it's driving, those marketing practices are driving the way that we behave, the way that we make decisions. So that you have brought to the table so many elements of reflection. And I just want to close this section with Jeff with the importance of our privacy and how our privacy becomes the Achilles heel of the industry, and our opportunity and space for litigation, accountability, and regulation of digital spaces. So Jeff, thank you very much for this opportunity of listening to you and your experience. And we want to jump now to our next speakers. And before, we would like to ask our participants to share in the chat one example of marketing practices used as corporate social responsibility campaigns that you've seen in your country. So please share them with us in the chat, and we will be looking into all of the examples that you can raise. Any corporate social responsibility programs that you've seen in your country coming from the ultra processed food and beverage industries. If there are any that you want to share with us. Okay, so we wanted to hear from you on the corporate responsibility programs of the industry, because that's actually one of the marketing practices that the industry uses. Now I will be switching to Spanish for our next speakers. Alejandro, muchas gracias por estar hoy con nosotros y por querer
Thank you so much, Alejandro, for joining us this morning and for wanting to share the experience you have led in Mexico with El Poder del Consumidor. El Poder del Consumidor recently filed administrative complaints against one of the biggest soda producers, given deceitful marketing linked to a CSR campaign. We'd like to know if you could share with us how CSR actions may be a marketing tool that is effective for these companies, and how from El Poder del Consumidor you have been able to argue that these corporate behaviors are a deceitful marketing case. The floor is yours, Alejandro. Thank you so very much for giving me this opportunity. Congratulations on the report and for addressing these issues. What Jeffrey exposed is very interesting about the use of artificial intelligence to be able to somehow reach in a deeper way certain sectors of our population and influencing them. We had been conducting a campaign called Salud Planeta, Planet Health. We called upon people to care for their health and the health of their planet. There was an image of a world half. Let's see if I can show it. This is an image. Half of the world was filled with trash, and the other half, and UPPs, and the other half of the world had healthy food, and that other half was healthy. Based on this context, we decided to file a complaint, and at the end of the campaign coincided with the fact that Coca-Cola was running the biggest advertising campaign in Mexico. This is a campaign that has been aired for 9 months, which is not very common. This is a campaign specifically based on CSR. And I'm saying CSR, if we could call it as such, where they are disguising what they do. The campaign says that they're looking after the welfare of the communities, that strengthens women, and that they recycle plastics and looks after the planet. Based on these 4 pillars, which is in the whole of media, radio, press, public spaces, TV, social media. The campaign is called With You, Love Multiplies. And this allowed us to think that we should be doing something. Everything that the campaign is saying are lies. And what we started to observe here is that in each of the aspects mentioned, they were just hiding this. When they talked about welfare for the community and that they were helping indigenous women, well, diabetes had become a problem in our country, especially amongst these communities. They did not have diabetes before. When they say that they protect water, well, this is one of the companies that more extracts water, and which causes serious hydric stress. We had a big problem with the supply of water in one of the cities to the north of our country, one of the biggest cities, Monterrey, to the north of our country. And Coca-Cola had 3 companies linked to them amongst the 10 companies that were more extracting water. So they were asked to give part of this water to the population. And I must say that the 3 companies that Coca-Cola had in Monterrey, based there, extract 4 times more than was authorized for the whole population in that state. And they said that they were recycling plastic. We all know that they are the main pollutant of plastic. And also that they were strengthening women. We even analyzed how many women work in important positions amongst Coca-Cola and Coca-Cola bottling companies. And in each of these cases, and this is the image I'm showing on the screen, we prepared a video while we filed the formal complaint, where we added what Coca-Cola was saying and the reply providing statistical data based on evidence, saying that they were lying and disguising everything. And we filed the complaint in 2 spheres: the sanitation sphere, which was more of a testimonial complaint, because actually there was not much to hold on to, but also within the sphere of protection for consumers, because in Mexico, as in many other countries, the definition of deceiving advertising is broad. And if we were able to show that advertising and these CSR campaigns deep inside are promoting products, these products, this was very well explained and grounded. These images are intended to show that these complaints were filed together with Greenpeace, together with an organization of young people for protection of water, together with a colleague from another organization. So we filed this along 2 lines. The authority that protects the rights for consumers, we filed it there, and before the sanitation authority as well. The legal strategy was, on the one hand, to collect all of Coca-Cola's reports and all of the international evidence available on deceiving advertising and brand positioning. And in this sense, there was already a background, the Framework Convention for Tobacco Control and its guidelines. Under these framework, at a certain point, I don't remember the dates well, I think 2003, tobacco advertising was banned, but the tobacco industry started back then to advertise CSR. In other words, these tobacco industries did not advertise cigarettes, but what they were doing was saying that they were doing very good things for the benefit of society. And afterwards, I think in 2013, the Framework Convention said no, advertising based on CSR is advertising products as well. And this is what we have to prove. There are several studies that published that acknowledge advertising of CSR actions, which actually is not CSR. It is disguising it because each of the aspects, or almost all of the aspects mentioned in these campaigns, for instance, by Coca-Cola, are disguising the aspects under which they're generating harm, for instance, harm on water, damage on water, and they carry out 3 or 4 small projects, and they are advertised as the big CSR action or the big responsibility Coca-Cola has to water. Or they run 10 campaigns, or for instance, to collect plastics on the beaches, and they say, we are collecting all of the plastics left on the beaches. So this is all intended to disguise what they do. They should not say it's CSR, but rather social makeup or greenwashing, disguising this, or even cultural disguising. So what we have to prove, what we have to show, and what we did through our complaint, what we intend to do is to use this as an initial step to be able to accomplish results. But we have to do this internationally. As in the case of tobacco, we have to expose this, expose why Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola are conducting a study in Australia, documenting how PepsiCo has moved towards CSR, or towards this sort of disguising tactics. This is something they did before with tobacco. The companies moved towards this, and they no longer do direct advertising of their products. I'm not saying that Coca-Cola is going to do this on an ongoing basis, but Coca-Cola is already playing with this to run the biggest campaign in Mexico. We are one of the biggest consumers of Coca-Cola products, a campaign that is purely social makeup, greenwashing, or cultural makeup. And so any type of advertising on CSR by these companies should be considered advertising of the product or a consumption of the product as established in the Framework Convention for Tobacco Control. We will start seeing this more intensely in the upcoming years in our country. And here I would like to share that after analyzing this, we are considering the hypotheses that CSR campaigns are much more powerful than product consumption campaigns. First of all, because on the one hand, they are promoting their products, and on the other hand, they position the brand, they position the industry to be able to penetrate immensely. Today, now in Mexico, if you hear radio stations, they are bombarding, saying that with Coca-Cola, love is multiplied, that with Coca-Cola, there is reforestation, that with Coca-Cola, water is protected, that with Coca-Cola, we have welfare amongst our communities, that with Coca-Cola, women are being empowered. So what would be a good proposal is to start taking on what's happening internationally, because this new path, this new avenue taken by the companies, very much aware of the fact that their products generate harm, and that being conscious about the harm of these products is growing. Denouncing this is very well documenting all of these aspects. What's important is being able to consider this nationally and internationally, that these campaigns, these advertising campaigns are advertising products and are part of deceiving advertising. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Alejandro, for sharing this information with the participants of the webinar. Actually, we find elements that I would like to highlight from what you shared. I think that through the work you have conducted, you have materialized not only the possibility for taking action by civil society, but you have also truly looked for elements beyond the promotion of the products that allow you to work on accountability exercises. Given that CSR campaigns are ultra targeted actions focused on small communities, but in addition, these campaigns are seeking, disguising, embellishing. I think that from El Poder del Consumidor, you have been able to develop a narrative that effectively counters the narrative used by the industry to the extent that the industry's narrative is concealing the true environmental damage they cause. But you have been very skillful in generating an alternative narrative where you talk about social makeup, green makeup, cultural makeup, which has a lot of weight and also somehow connects the conversations with our prior panelists, which is that there are many elements linked to human beings, but also to what the communities are, which are being affected by the actions of the corporations, either in digital spaces or and the usual advertising we see, and also in the spaces of CSR activities that you have shared with us. So, Alejandro, you have done a great work from El Poder del Consumidor. I think we have several questions from our participants that we would like to share with all of you. I'm going to read the questions we have received. Some have already been answered through the chat.
Sorry for that. So some of the questions that have been raised in the Q&A chat have been already responded by some of our panelists, but I wouldn't like these responses to be lost there if someone hasn't looked into the box of the chat. So we have one question that was talking about the ethical practices and if there is possibility for regulation to bring these ethical practices and accountability to the digital marketing of the food industry. So maybe Petronell and Jeff, you would like to answer in 2 minutes to this question that brings the ethical component of the industry, of all the marketing more than the industry. Petronell.
Fantastic. Yeah, I am very interested actually to hear Jeff on this. So my response that I gave was, in a perfect world under perfect conditions, we don't have to rely on industries being ethical because we'll just regulate and we'll make ethics legality. Of course, we don't live in that perfect world, and there are very few issues, if any, that we've actually managed to use regulation to cut out bad behavior completely. But what we are trying to do is being as quick as possible and as comprehensive as possible. Now, one of the issues that I've seen, and maybe I'm overestimating this level of corporate power, and maybe I'm underestimating it, and I see my power just went, so I'm hope someone will have to unmute me or something, or mute me later, is that when we're trying to regulate, for example, marketing practices on some of these non-linear media sources, we're really having fairly small countries, or even middle-income countries, going up against corporate behemoths, and practically speaking, to try and get a Facebook or a Twitter, although that might become easier if Elon stays there. But to try and get those companies to surrender some of their intellectual property or to have that regulated can be very difficult, especially when they have the threat of pulling out, which could be bad for politicians who use those platforms to lobby and to make sure that they get elected. But very curious. I mean, one of the imperfect conditions is Jeff taught me so many things today. And as a, as a public health lawyer, I can't ask for the regulation of those things if I don't know about them. So I'm also facing sort of this knowledge gap, and that will be true, I think, for everyone in this space.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Petronelle. And we would like to hear from you, Jeff, on all those ethical practices and accountability opportunities. And I will like to add to you, Jeff, one question that also comes into the chat, which is how to protect privacy of children without identifying children on the internet. Would that need data collection, Jeff?
Well, I mean, look, he's clearly pressing the ethical issues here, and it really reflects all the great work that Alejandro and your colleagues have done on these important issues that exposing these campaigns is kind of partly the key goal. Look, the industry on the one hand has never been more powerful, but it's never been more vulnerable, in my view. And what's been missing from activism in the United States, where I'm based, frankly, is the lack of organizing and advocacy around these issues, around the food marketing and big data issues. So we're letting them get away with it. But ever since the EU, I think it was in 2017, passed the General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR, there's been a growing wave of the demands for privacy regulation, of digital marketing regulation. The UK famously passed what's called the Design Code, which regulates the social media platforms. The state of California, where I'm based, passed such a bill. Even in the United States, this crazy Congress, there's bipartisan legislation that would regulate digital media, especially for minors 17 and under. So there is a growing wave, and there's so many examples all over the world when you see what the companies are doing, whether it's in Asia Pacific and South America and South. So the material is there. So I certainly think exposing this to the regulators, to the public, to the companies is important, but also engaging with the advertisers as one of the strategies. There's a spin-off of the World Federation of Advertisers, which is kind of the global lobbying apparatus for the industry, and it's called the Global Alliance for Responsible Media. And I know that is an oxymoron, and I wish I spoke Spanish to say what oxymoron was in Spanish, but the companies are all campaigning. We're great with privacy, we're great with children, we're great with the environment, which of course is not true. Now, what's important about this Global Alliance for Responsible Media is they actually have direct influence on how all the platforms operate. So it's another pressure point for us. So raising these ethical issues, exposing what they're really doing, calling for regulation, but engaging with the industry to see how far we can push them should be part of our tool set. I'm not so sure I answered the question, but thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. And we have two more questions that I will put in only one for you, Alejandro, and I'll be shifting to Spanish again. So, Alejandro, en el chat tenemos dos preguntas.
Over the chat, we have two questions, Alejandro. One has to do with how can we argue against Coca-Cola practices. This is a question from Brazil, where the person who asked the question says that Coca-Cola is migrating towards returnable bottles, considering impact on the environment. The question is, how can we argue against these practices if the initiative, in fact, reduces the consumption of plastic? So in that case, it gives rise to some sort of a dilemma. And how much time have you devoted to planning this whole process and the campaign in itself? The fact that Coca-Cola is now moving to reusable containers or bottles is something that is taking place regarding the impact derived from this company, Coca-Cola, whether plastic or glass produces huge impacts on our health. The way, I mean, in Mexico, for instance, Coca-Cola in itself has no benefit. So it's good that they will be using recyclable containers, but that doesn't change the product. We're talking about the impacts, the harm caused by their product. In relation to the time we have devoted, well, the time and the resources we have devoted to our campaigns are infinitely insignificant in relation to what these companies devote to this. I would like to share a very important piece of information. In 2004, a tax was passed for sugary drinks in Mexico. It's a small 10% tax, but in 2013, a year before, there was also a reduction in the consumption of sugar sweetened beverages. And this had to do, according to some published papers, it had to do with the campaigns. In other words, and we have said it, if we had 10% of what Coca-Cola invests in advertising, if we had this amount to inform based on scientific evidence on the products that people are consuming, in this case, on these beverages, we'd have a reduction in the consumption of these beverages. The thing is that this is linked to these disguising campaigns and the addictive nature of these products.
We have
Thank you, Alejandro.
in the chat, which is during the production of or the generation of the report, well, ultra-processed marketing actions evaluated in live broadcast on internet, for example, YouTube or Twitch? And if so, if you can comment on the difference in the impact on the public of this type of actions compared to more traditional ones, such as TV ads. And if there is any difference in content of advertisement and on internet and other type of media.
Yes, Lore, I was answering in writing, but I can comment and then finalize my response. So in the report, we have a sample of all the examples that we have collected. We cannot input 300 examples in the report. But what we highlighted in the report was the use of some kids influencers, so children and adolescents that are posting on YouTube mainly. We don't have examples from Twitch about the consumption of ultra-processed products. And what happens, and what we have seen from some evidence that we reviewed for the report, is that digital marketing platforms such as YouTube, Twitch, TikTok, have as audience children and adolescents. So I think that there are children that are maybe 3 years old or even a little bit older, and they already have access to a tablet where they connect and they see all this content. And what happens with these types of influencers and this marketing that is very subtle is that these people, these children and adolescents that are positioning ultra-processed products, brands or fast food brands, is that they behave as role models. So people who consume and children who consume this kind of content, they cannot differentiate if it's advertising or it's like organic content, and it has a huge influence on them. So just that for now, Lore. Thanks.
Thank you, Luhi. And I would like to start with the closing remarks of this space. And once again, thank you to all of our panelists for participating and sharing with us your experience and knowledge on this specific topic of marketing restrictions and marketing practices, which is actually very complex. And as Alejandro was mentioning, we have, this is a battle that at some point tobacco control advocates also face, but they still have some challenges with marketing and specifically digital marketing spaces. So how we can also work towards innovative paths to create cases for accountability, for example, and how we can also through those innovative approaches create narratives that are actually effective to counter not only what the industry is doing, but also to normalize a lot of practices that have led us not only to corporate diets, but also to accept in some way that our privacy could be violated and other human rights that are in play with all these marketing practices without any corruption. sorry, without any regulation. I was just looking into the chat that the conversation around the corruption. So with this, I would like to thank you again to all the participants for being here on the launch of this report. I remind you of our web microsite, Industry Watch at GHAI website. And I would like to give the floor to Lucy Martinez-Sullivan, who is our Senior GHAI Vice President, who will provide some additional closing remarks. Lucy, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Lore. And thank you to the presenters and my colleagues at GHAI for an outstanding conversation. Petronel, Jeff, and Alejandro, we're really so grateful for the work that you do every day to go up against these powerful industries to protect our health, our privacy, and our human rights. So this report adds to the body of literature that shows that the marketing of ultra-processed products are indeed shaping unhealthy food environments with devastating consequences for our health and that of future generations. It ends with a call to action because inaction is no longer an option. Governments have to level the playing field by restricting the aggressive and unethical marketing of ultra-processed products. But of course, that's no easy task when governments and government actions have been neutralized by industry. It's been said before, but the market power of the food and beverage industry translates into the political power, and the political power, which results in weak or no regulation and government capture, further solidifies their market power. A few of the presenters commented on the fact that these companies, these corporations, are indeed behemoths, and the industry is huge. It reaches the food and beverage manufacturers reach nearly every person on the planet. The estimates are that the top 22 firms sell about roughly 1 out of every 5 food and beverage products purchased around the world. Marketing is the engine for this growth, with corporations like a Coca-Cola spending $4 billion a year on marketing. That's why these attempts to restrict the marketings of ultra-processed products are an existential threat to companies like Coca-Cola, Nestle, Mars, Pepsi, and other major corporations. And it's why the industry has pushed so aggressively for self-regulation. Just yesterday, coincidentally, Nestle announced a ban on advertising high sugar products targeted to children under 16. So it's an update to their policy, and they claim that they will no longer market cookies, ice cream, sugary drinks to children under the age of 16. So this adds, of course, to the effort of industry to self-regulate, and I wonder if it's in reaction to our report, and perhaps we should take the credit, but to me, it's actually probably more a response to the work that many of you in this community have done to expose the harmful effects of marketing, and the successful advocacy that you've all engaged in to implement front of pack warning labels, marketing restrictions, sugar sweetened beverage taxes. It's why GHAI will continue to focus on counteracting industry oppositions to healthy food policies and to support civil society organizations around the world who are fighting the massive interference of the powerful industry. GHAI's efforts around this area are cross-cutting. As many of you know, we are part of the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, and so we have a long history of fighting powerful industries with much success. And we know that these industries use the same playbook and increasingly are taking up more and more space in policymaking at the same time that civil society space is actually shrinking in many places around the world. Corporate participation in policymaking has become far too normalized, and this, of course, has led to the capture of government by corporate interests. And so the need for strong efforts to denormalize this has never been greater and never been more urgent. And so GHAI stands ready to support civil society organizations fighting to expose the insidious marketing and unethical practices of industries. And so we welcome your continued engagement and your ideas about how GHAI can continue to shine a spotlight on these actions and on these practices, and to ensure that human health is prioritized over corporate wealth. So thank you again to our panelists and to all the participants who joined us today. Thanks, and over to you, Lore.
Thank you, Lucy. And once again, thank you also to our interpreters for supporting us today, and to all the GHAI team for supporting the logistics and the very hard work that is behind this report. The recordings of these sessions for those that are interested will be available soon in the microsite in English, Spanish, and